Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Louisa Pilbeam. Our top stories. United States imports hit a record high as businesses prepare for Trump's tariffs. China calls the policy vile.
Our other headlines, a sigh of relief for borrowers as the Bank of England cuts interest rates to 4.5%, but it also slashes the UK's growth forecast in a major blow to the government.
President Trump doubles down on his controversial plan for the United States to take over Gaza and for the millions of Palestinians there to be resettled.
And the United Nations says thousands of people have been killed in the city of Goma. Now the Democratic Republic of the Congo calls for an investigation.
US imports hit a record high in December as businesses race to stock up on goods ahead of President Trump's slew of tariffs.
Levels leapt by 3.5% from the previous month to a record $364 billion. Surveys suggest business owners feared price rises and goods shortages even before Donald Trump took office. China has restated its criticism of the new US tariffs on its products, calling them vile and unilateralist. Beijing says it's open to talks but will not be bullied, adding that tariffs are not in the interests of American consumers.
We hope the US can adapt to the development trend of international trade to create a fair and predictable policy environment for the development of cross-border e-commerce and provide consumers with a more convenient, better quality and more cost-effective market.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent Nick Harper in Washington. Nick, we heard the view from Beijing there. Businesses clearly concerned about tariffs. How does it look from that neck of the woods?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jamie, because economic data can often be so dry, but this is a fascinating snapshot. It looks at December's imports and exports and clearly shows that companies were concerned about Donald Trump taking office on January the 20th and what all of that would mean for them. We've obviously seen tariffs coming into effect as he promised. So a real race on for those companies during December to get goods into the country before that extra 10% blanket tariff was put into place. So just to dig into the numbers, imports surging to a record high, up 3.5% in December, and at the same time, exports falling, down 2.6%. And the problem, of course, is that increases that trade gap, that trade deficit, increasing by nearly 25% in December to more than $68 billion. And that's the highest level since March 2022. All of that very much showing that companies were worried. They wanted to get those goods into the US as quickly as they could, ahead of tariffs coming in. And it's more bad news for the US president, who has, of course, railed against that trade deficit, trying to decrease it, suggesting that tariffs would help. The adverse effect that we're now seeing is that it certainly did not help in December, simply widening that gap between imports and exports.
Nick, let's just put imports to one side. Today is the deadline for millions of government workers to accept a contract buyout. Do you have any idea of the numbers who might have accepted the offer?
Yeah, Jamie, that deal is still on the table, but not for long. Federal workers have until midnight tonight to decide whether or not they want to take it up. The White House has called it a rare, generous offer. And they're saying that so far about 40,000 employees have said that they will take up the offer to leave work now but get paid through the end of September. In terms of percentages, that's about 2% of the federal workers' 2 million workforce. The White House is aiming for a target of about 5 to 10% for these voluntary redundancies. Now, they're looking to cut government waste, but there are significant questions as to who will fill what are, in theory, fundamental government roles. And unions are telling workers that they should not take up this offer. They're questioning the legality of it, and they're also questioning whether the administration will come through on its promises. One more thing that will be happening during the course of the day, before that midnight deadline, in 2 hours' time, there is a court hearing. A lawsuit has been brought against the Trump administration for this, calling it arbitrary, unlawful and a short-fused ultimatum. This lawsuit trying to push back that deadline to give workers more time to consider it. But of course the union saying, look, don't take up this offer, it's a risky bet. Jamie?
Nick, thank you for that. Our correspondent Nick Harper in Washington. So how might the US tariff policy affect its domestic economy? Our correspondent Owen Fairclough has been meeting consumers and businesses.
From Oaxaca to Ottawa.
It might mean opting for Canadian rye over Kentucky bourbon.
Beijing to Brussels.
We are talking about $5 trillion of mutual investments.
Donald Trump is once again unleashing a global trade war with some of America's closest neighbors and critical trade partners who fear tariffs on their exports to the US will be catastrophic. Trump waged similar tariffs during his first term to protect US jobs both from cheaper foreign competition and outsourcing.
Companies are not going to leave the United States anymore without consequences. Not going to happen.
Now he's using those duties as leverage to force some partners into boosting border security to stop opioid smuggling and illegal immigration. Either way, even Trump recognizes tariffs have adverse consequences.
There would be some pain.
And many experts say duties do backfire.
They include the US Chamber of Commerce. It thinks that tariffs will mean higher prices for US consumers who've just suffered the highest inflation for decades and are still enduring elevated prices on some goods. So even though the US economy is in good shape, fears that life will become more expensive again amid lower growth are widely shared.
But just how much more expensive isn't clear. Some studies based on previous trade battles suggest the price of steel rose by nearly a fifth in less than a year, while duties on Chinese tires ended in higher overall imports. But another study on the impact of Trump's previous trade battles found a 20% tariff equated to a price rise of less than 1% on goods including furniture, dishes and linens. Even so, tariffs are frequently geographically disproportionate.
To be a bourbon, you have to be made here. And Kentucky, we are ground zero.
Such as Canada's proposed retaliation against one of America's most iconic exports.
The impact is going to be felt the most in Kentucky.
Trump claims tariffs will help cut the trade deficit. That's a country importing more than it exports.
The United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country.
But that deficit hit record highs during Trump's first term, despite tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of imports. And it keeps rising, up by nearly a quarter in December, according to government figures released on Wednesday. If the impact on consumers isn't certain, some in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, which voted overwhelmingly for Trump, seem ambivalent for now.
I don't think the tariffs would be too bad.
Let's give it a go.
Let's give it a go.
And we'll see.
Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Shipping giant Maersk says it's expecting global cargo to increase this year despite US tariffs. The Danish firm has reported its third strongest year, with operating profits up 65% in 2024 to $6.5 billion. However, Maersk says it has plans to return to shipping in the Red Sea due to the threat of Houthi fighters in Yemen. It said President Trump's policy of imposing import tariffs would not have a massive impact on business. Well, Peter Sand is chief analyst at the freight market analytics firm Zenita. Good to see you, Peter. What do you think then? Maersk seeing resilience in global trade despite the tariff threat. But what happens if all of these threatened tariffs do go ahead?
Global shippers are constantly challenged with new risks coming to them left, right, and center. If it's not the Red Sea disruption, it's new tariffs walls around U.S. Right. So one thing that shippers are looking for is retaining their options and ensuring that they can still provide the goods to their consumers in the end in the way that they used to. And well, they can't do it as usual. So they need to find other ways, and that's basically bringing a strain on everyone working in global shipping supply chains.
Okay, yeah, supply chains is what I was going to come on to next. So they're always looking, you say, for other ways to find this stability. What about the increasing costs on Chinese imports? Could we see some effect on those supply chains?
If history is anything to go by, in the first trade war, we definitely saw American investments being made in Vietnam and some other places in Southeast Asia also. And a lot of goods also being transported directly out of China into the likes of Canada and Mexico, and then finding its way to the end consumers in US. So if shippers will draw on that experience, and we expect they will do so to a larger extent this time around, going to what they hope is a safe haven in the wider Southeast Asian region, maybe also to India to source their products in order to basically avoid the tariff hikes on Chinese goods.
Okay, so perhaps going to India, Maersk reported mentioning some sort of cost cutting that they might need to bring in. So what could this mean for global shipping firms?
Global shipping firms and the main carriers are really good at moving large volumes on main hauls. So what this means may actually be a little bit of, bitter taste to the carriers, but a nice sweeter taste to the forwarders that tends to be more agile, that tend to offer services to shippers when it becomes a little bit more niche, a little bit more troublesome. So someone may benefit, someone may get more challenge, but for sure a lot of investments needs to be done in order to find ways around tariff walls.
Yeah, and in general then, on a global front, how concerning do you think shipping companies are concerned about Donald Trump's tariffs?
I think they're rightly very concerned, but it's not the only risk coming about these years, right? If we only dial back a few years, we have learned the effect of Russia's invasion into Ukraine. We have learned the effect of Houthi rebels closing the Red Sea. And we have seen in the first tenure of Trump in the White House how shippers and shipping lines could react to a trade war. So it's, well, another day, another risk to manage. And I'm pretty sure they got plenty of contingency plans, everyone out there. But it's not getting easier by the day. And it's not getting less expensive. So you need to be able to benchmark your performance in the market, right? Ensure that you work with the right suppliers and you pay the right money for that service.
Okay, as you say, another day, another risk to manage. Thank you very much. Peter Sand, Chief Analyst at the freight market analytics firm Zenaja. Thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the number of Americans claiming unemployment benefit went up last week. We're in New York. Next.
Chinese paper cutting, known as jianzhe, is thought to have originated during the 6th century CE. However, some believe that its history could be traced back further. Usually the artworks are made of red paper, as the colour red is associated with festivities and luck in Chinese culture. Cut paper artwork is used as a way of decorating doors and windows during festivals such as Chinese New Year and weddings, symbolising good wishes and happiness. The common tools used in Chinese paper cutting are scissors or an engraving knife. Yin and yang are the two main techniques used in paper cutting. Yin refers to the process of cutting out a defined shape, whereas yang refers to cutting out the negative space around that shape. Works are mainly divided into southern and northern styles. The southern style utilises fine and precise cuts to create intricate lace-like patterns, showcasing themes from nature such as plants and animals. The northern style is known for its exaggerated shapes and vigorous designs, emphasising strong lines, symmetry and contrast, and often features themes from Chinese mythology and historical figures. Today, paper cutting is one of the most popular folk arts in China.
To global business Europe. The number of Americans claiming unemployment benefit went up last week, leading to concerns over the labour market. Let's talk to our correspondent Mitch McCann, who's in New York. So, Mitch, unemployment up more than expected. What's going on?
Yeah, that's right. The number of Americans filing new applications for unemployment benefits rose only slightly last week to 219,000 for the week ending the 1st of February. And this represents a rise of about 11,000 from the week before, which was around 208,000 people filing applications. So it's about 6,000 more jobs than was forecast by analysts. And these numbers give us an indication of which way the US labour market and more widely the US economy might be heading. So this rise might be an early indication of a softening of the labour market. However, 11,000 jobs is not a significant bump, and these numbers are subject to being revised as well. So it's possible that figure could change, and this has had no significant effect on the US dollar either this morning. So we're likely to get a broader, perhaps more accurate picture of the current job market, and one, in fact, under a new US president in the coming weeks.
I want to ask you about Qualcomm. Stocks are down despite better than expected results. What's the story on that?
Yeah, that's right. The company that's headquartered in San Diego in California saw its stock fall around 5% early on Thursday, despite Qualcomm's strong first quarter results, which showed revenue up 18% from $9.92 billion a year ago. Now, it's reported that stock price fell after the company said its licensing business, which equated for almost 15% of revenue in the most recent quarter, would not see growth after the expiration of its agreement with Huawei Technologies. Now, despite that, Reuters is reporting that Qualcomm has secured license agreements with two other Chinese smartphone firms. But regardless, with Qualcomm's strong first quarter earnings, it remains at the forefront of this industry that's really under pressure at the moment. There are a number of hurdles to overcome in the next quarter for the company, including this licensing issue I've just talked about, but also the broader uncertainty over the artificial intelligence industry at the moment.
Mitch, thank you for that. Our correspondent Mitch McCann in New York.
The Bank of England has cut interest rates to 4.5%, the lowest since June 2023. The 25 basis point cut makes borrowing cheaper and is intended to boost spending, but a lower rate can lead to smaller returns for savers. The bank has also slashed its growth forecast for the year, a blow to the government, which has made boosting the economy its priority.
The judgment we will have to make at our future meetings is whether underlying inflationary pressures in the UK economy are easing enough to allow further cuts in bank rates. Some domestic inflationary pressures remain and may have eased a little more slowly than we expected last year. And that reaffirms the importance of taking a gradual approach to the withdrawal of monetary policy restrictiveness.
The Norwegian energy giant Equinor is halving its investment in renewable energy over the next 2 years while increasing fossil fuel production. The company has raised its forecast for oil output by 2030 from 2 million barrels per day to 2.2 million. That's up 10%. Profits fell in the fourth quarter, but by less than expected.
Chinese EV maker BYD has overtaken its American rival Tesla in new vehicle registrations in the United Kingdom. BYD's registrations were up more than 500% compared with a year ago. The company is reported to be planning to hire an additional 20,000 staff in China in the first quarter for roles across various sectors.
Gucci's creative director has left the company after less than 2 years in the job. Sabato De Sarno's departure comes just weeks ahead of Milan Fashion Week. His time in the company was marked by disappointing sales, which caused revenues to fall by 26%. Several Asian leaders are visiting China. President Xi Jinping has been meeting the Thai Prime Minister and the Sultan of Brunei as Beijing looks to boost regional cooperation. Our correspondent Yo Yang reports.
A busy week for Chinese diplomacy. On Thursday, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with the visiting Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. During their meeting, President Xi said this year marks the 50th anniversary since the establishment of diplomatic ties between China and Thailand, which is also, in his words, the golden 50 years of China-Thailand friendship. He said he hopes the two sides forge ahead together and promote the construction of a China-Thailand community with a shared future. At the same time, the Chinese leader also said that China appreciates Thailand's efforts to combat online gambling and telecom fraud. He added that two sides should continue to strengthen law enforcement, security and judicial cooperation to safeguard the safety of people's lives and property. For her part, Paetongtarn responded that her country is willing to strengthen law enforcement cooperation with China and other neighboring countries and take effective measures to crack down cross-border crimes. On the same day, the Chinese leader also met with the visiting Sultan of Brunei, Hassan al-Bolkiah. She called on the two countries to enhance communication and coordination under the construction of the Belt and Road Initiative, as well as the Brunei's Vision 2035, promoting flagship projects such as the Guangxi-Brunei Economic Corridor. Also, Chinese President Xi Jinping is going to attend the opening ceremony of the 9th Asian Winter Games in Harbin on Friday and will hold a welcoming banquet for foreign leaders attending the event. Those include visiting Pakistani President Zardari and Kyrgyz President Japarov and other leaders. Yo Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
The Democratic Republic of the Congo is calling for a United Nations investigation into what it says are violations carried out in the city of Goma. The UN says nearly 3,000 people have been killed during fighting between M23 rebels and the National Army. Clashes have continued despite the M23 group declaring a ceasefire earlier this week. Our correspondent Chris Okamringa is in Kinshasa for us. Chris, what is the story there?
Well, so what we've learned is that the M23 rebels have captured another town in South Kivu province, which is neighboring North Kivu, where they have captured swathes of territory since late 2021. And we're told this town is rich in minerals like gold, coltan and other precious stones. And this seizure of this town comes just a day after the rebels announced a unilateral ceasefire for humanitarian reasons. Now, Congolese officials are saying they're not surprised by the turn of events. They're saying the rebels have always violated the ceasefires that have been called before to try and allow peace to be held in that area, and Congolese authorities are continuing mobilizing their troops and the people to rally around the National Army to defend their territory from any more attacks by the M23 rebels. We've also learned that they have issued an international arrest warrant on the leader of the Alliance Fleuve Congo, which is the coalition that includes the M23 rebel group, Kone Nanga. And earlier today, Kone Nanga held a very large gathering in the city of Goma, where they're consolidating their hold of this area. They have already installed a new governor, a mayor, and told thousands of people who attended this event at a stadium in Goma that they should join their movement, and parents should take their children back to school next week. Civil servants should start working, and that their plan is to march all the way to the capital, Kinshasa, to overthrow the government of President Felix Tshisekedi. Some very tough words there. The DRC government is saying that they're planning a vigorous and coordinated response to reclaim all the areas that have been captured by the rebels. And so there's a likelihood of an outbreak of violence. But regional leaders from the African Union are trying to stave off that. So there is a summit that will be held in the Tanzanian city of Dar es Salaam on Friday and Saturday. This has been called by leaders of the East African Community Regional Bloc and the Southern African Development Community, and we're told that President Felix Tshisekedi of the DRC and his Rwandan counterpart Paul Kagame will attend this meeting, and these leaders are trying to resolve this conflict through dialogue to ensure that there's no more fighting and the displacement of people from the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Okay, our correspondent Chris Okonringa in Kinshasa, thank you very much indeed.
Investigators in Sweden are trying to piece together what happened during the lead-up to a mass shooting at an adult education centre in Örebro.
The suspect has been identified as a 35-year-old man. 10 people were killed before the gunman shot himself. Our correspondent Pablo Guterres reports.
Chaos and terror. That's how police describe the scene inside the Risberska Adult Education Center after a gunman indiscriminately opened fire against anyone who crossed his path.
The police officers who arrived at the scene have spoken about what could be described as an inferno. Dead people, injured people, screams and smoke.
Örebro Police Chief Lars Wieren says officers never fired their weapons but were targeted by the gunman. Authorities have not released the suspect's identity, but we know that he was a 35-year-old resident of Örebro who had been unemployed for nearly a decade.
Was he shot by police or did he shoot himself?
He shot himself.
Meanwhile, 6 survivors remain at Örebro University Hospital, most of them in serious but stable condition. Police say the suspect was armed with 3 weapons, multiple rounds of ammunition and a knife. He first entered one of the bathrooms here at this school campus, changed into what these witnesses describe as green military-style clothing, and then began his attack. Sweden is mourning. Some families are still waiting for news. Not all victims have been formally identified. Residents who we spoke with held back their tears and comforted each other.
Sweden has always been a very peaceful country to live in. It's not like that anymore because we get a lot of criminality these days and a lot of violence, a lot more than we used to.
Outside the apartment of the alleged shooter, neighbors who describe the man as a recluse are also trying to come to grips with this tragedy.
It was a lot of police, and they were in here and asked for the key to come into the port, and then we decided to close that day this office.
As Örebro tries to heal, Sweden is left with deep scars and many questions. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN, Örebro, Sweden.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. It's all downhill from here. Athletes take to the ice and snow for the Asian Winter Games in China.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The cleanup operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Peking opera, or Jingju, is a classic form of Chinese performance art, combining the music of Chinese instruments, costume, face painting, literature, and history. It arose in Beijing over 200 years ago during the Mid-Qing dynasty. There are 4 main characters: the Sheng, who are gentlemen, Dan, who are women, Jing, who are men of strong character, and Cho, who are clowns. Each character has a different age, gender, and social status. Performers use 4 main skills, namely song, speech, dance acting, and combat. And the highest aim of performers is to put beauty into every motion. Today, Peking opera is regarded as a quintessential form of Chinese culture.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Louisa Pilbeam. Our top stories. United States imports hit a record high as businesses prepare for Trump's tariffs. China calls policy vile.
Our other headlines: a sigh of relief for borrowers as the Bank of England cuts interest rates to 4.5%. But it also slashes the UK's growth forecast in a major blow to the government.
And the UN says thousands of people have been killed in the city of Goma. Now the Democratic Republic of the Congo calls for an investigation.
President Trump has doubled down on his controversial plan for the United States to take over Gaza and for millions of Palestinians to be deported. He posted on Thursday that the territory would be handed over to the US by Israel after the population had been moved elsewhere.
The plan, which Trump described as permanent, has sent shockwaves around the world and drawn widespread condemnation, including accusations of ethnic cleansing. But US officials appeared to roll back on Trump's comments, with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying Gazans would only leave temporarily, comments echoed by the White House press secretary.
The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct this region. The president has made it clear that they need to be temporarily relocated out of Gaza for the rebuilding of this effort.
Our correspondent Jonathan Regev is in Tel Aviv. Jonathan, so President Trump says Israel will hand over Gaza to the United States.
Yes, and it's quite strange, I would say, because Israel is not the owner of Gaza. Gaza is not in Israeli hands. True, at the moment, there are still Israeli forces inside Gaza, but even if, let's say that the ceasefire goes into the second stage in about a month or so, even less, then all Israeli forces would be out of Gaza. All the forces will withdraw. Therefore, how will Israel hand over Gaza to the United States when it's a territory which is not considered Israel, even in Israeli eyes? Therefore, it is quite a strange comment by the U.S. president. But this is the plan. This is how he plans to move forward. Of course, when it comes to Israel, and especially the supporters of the far right and the far right parties, they're ecstatic with this plan. They're calling for it to happen. And I have to say, you know, the basic idea of a Gaza where there are no Palestinians is something that is appealing to Israelis, and not only from the far right. Gaza is seen as a threat, not only by supporters of the far right, by practically the entire Israeli population, especially after what happened on October 7th, 2023. The view towards Gaza, which was always rather suspicious in the entire population, has changed completely. Having said all that, is it possible for Israel to hand over Gaza to the United States? Is all this viable? Is this a plan that could eventually happen? Not so sure, but for the moment, this is something that the U.S. president is pushing forward.
Several Israeli officials have expressed support, with the army told to prepare for voluntary departures from Gaza.
Exactly, and Israel is already making plans to make this happen. The defense minister, Israel Katz, this morning published a statement saying that he has given orders to the army to actually create a plan that would facilitate the departure of Gazans voluntarily, of course, not by force, but would facilitate their departure from Gaza into other territories by land or by sea. Again, this is a rather difficult thing to do, as leave by air. How can you do that when there's no airport in Gaza? Leave by sea. How can you do that when the Gaza port is sort of a fisherman's port for small boats, not for anything big that could take hundreds of thousands or millions of people away? But at least on the ground, when it comes to the level of statements, Israel is already making the preparations, according to Defense Minister Israel Katz. This is already happening. As far as the Israeli government, as far as the far right, preparations are on, and the next stage is Gaza empty or almost empty of Palestinians. You ask the Palestinians in Gaza, you ask the Palestinians in the West Bank, you ask the Arab world, of course the view is different.
Jonathan, thank you for that. Our correspondent Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv.
Well, let's get the reaction to these developments from inside Gaza. Our correspondent Rami Al-Maghari is in Gaza City. Rami, roll back then from US officials on Trump's comments, but enthusiasm from Israel, including talk of people being allowed to leave Gaza voluntarily.
Yes, this is actually something that the Palestinians are rejecting and wondering extremely about. How come they should leave their place, their land, that is their own, out of plans or remarks by a United States President by means of the remarks. This is something outrageous. This is something that has outraged the Palestinians here, and they are insisting on keeping up on their lands, on sticking to their lands, to their territory, despite the enormous pressure they are having, or they have been having over the past 15 months. And what indicates this is the fact that many or tens of thousands of households who had their homes destroyed either partially or completely are sticking to their homes. They are destroyed and they're living on it, getting by, trying to repair some of the damage. And they say, we have spoken to many of them, they say they are going to stick to their land, whatever the price, whatever the outcome is. This actually is something that is a matter of strange. It's a matter of wonder, a great wonder for Palestinians at all levels, the population, the political levels, and the factional level at the Palestinian parties. That's the main mood of the Palestinians here in the Gaza Strip in reacting to Trump's remarks or Trump's plans to transfer Gazans.
Okay, our correspondent in Gaza, Rami Al-Maghari, thank you very much indeed.
Yes, please.
Two planes have collided on the tarmac at an airport in the United States. A taxiing Japan Airlines jet hit the tail of a Delta plane at Seattle International. There were no reports of injuries, and an investigation has now been launched. This comes a week after 67 people were killed in a mid-air collision between a military helicopter and an American Airlines passenger plane over Washington.
The French Senate has approved the 2025 budget, sending it to the Constitutional Council to review before President Emmanuel Macron can sign it into law. Far-left lawmakers introduced two no-confidence motions against Prime Minister François Bayrou after he invoked special constitutional powers to force through the budget. He survived both votes.
London's Grenfell Tower, where 72 people died in a fire in 2017, is set to be demolished. Engineers have warned that the remaining structure will deteriorate and should be taken down. It'll be replaced by a memorial with a final design expected next year. Many families have said the tower should remain until there are criminal prosecutions over the failings that led to the fire.
The Greek island of Santorini has felt its strongest earthquake yet, following days of tremors. The 5.2 magnitude quake shook the island on Wednesday, the first to exceed the 5 mark since the quakes started last week. The island has left largely deserted by visitors and residents. Around 11,000 people are thought to have fled as fears grow of a bigger earthquake.
The 2025 Asian Winter Games begin on Friday in the Chinese city of Harbin.
President Xi Jinping will attend the opening ceremony with athletes competing in 64 ice and snow events. Our correspondent Siobhan McCall reports.
This is the third time the Asian Winter Games have been held in China and the second time in Harbin. It's set to be the biggest games yet, with a record 34 countries and regions competing. 3 countries are competing for the first time. More than 1,200 athletes will take part, beating the record set in Japan in 2017. China is sending 170 athletes, 85 men and 85 women. And 5 Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic champions are representing China, including short-track speed skaters Liu Shaoang and Fan Kexin.
Well, wouldn't you know, Harbin is the hometown of our distinguished correspondent Li Jianhua. You're in the wrong place. You shouldn't be here with us in London. You should be back home. What should we look out for then? Talk us through it.
I may not want to be somewhere really cold. You know, it is minus 27 degrees Celsius now. So I think we're expecting fierce competition among about 1,300 athletes from over 30 countries and regions. Some of the competitions actually have already started, including ice hockey and curling competitions, which started on Monday and Tuesday. But short track speed skating, which is usually considered the most competitive and the most watchable on ice, and that will begin tomorrow. So it's going to be cold, about between minus 15 and minus 23 degrees Celsius, but it does enhance the allure of the city as the winter wonderland. The city is famous for its ice and snow world, which features massive and intricate ice and snow sculptures. The city's rich Russian influence is also reflected in the architectural styles and food. I think that is the impression that most of the athletes and visitors will have. This is the second time that Harbin is hosting the Asian Winter Games. The last time it was in 1996, and President Xi Jinping will be there attending the opening ceremony together with all of the dignitaries he has been meeting all through the past few days. And 6 venues, major venues across the city, they're quite spread out, mainly because the city has prioritized repurposing some of the existing venues for sustainability purposes. And top athletes in Asia will be there, and the games will decide who will get to go to the Winter Olympics.
Yeah, so it's all going on, absolutely freezing there, but it looks like it's going to have a hot impact on the economy, do you reckon?
You're right, and I would say the burrowingly cold weather fueled the city's economy, and the city's economic landscape actually experienced big transformation all through the past few decades. It was known as it was known for its industrial roots when the new China was founded in 1949, and then heavy industry started to go down in the 1970s and 80s. So was the city's economy, but it managed to rebrand itself as the premier destination for winter sports. And also the timing of these games has helped the city big time, because the games will take place between the 7th and 14th of February. That is in line with the Lunar New Year and also the Valentine's Day. The local authorities have already said that the number of visitors increased big time, about 20% compared to the same time last year. And also, you know, it goes beyond the city itself. It's going to bring a lot of economic benefit to the country as a whole. The event is part of China's ambition of making itself a global power in winter sports. And according to the NDRC, the country's top economic planner, that one of the targets for the next 5 years will be expanding ice and snow economy to about $210 billion by 2030.
Jianhua, thank you very much. Our correspondent Li Jianhua, and Harbin's unofficial ambassador. China's medal hopefuls include Beijing 2022 champion Liu Shaoang and his older brother Shaolin. The pair compete in short-track speed skating and will take part in the 500 metres speed heats beginning on Friday.
Born in Hungary to a Chinese father and Hungarian mother, they switched national teams to China 2 years ago. Zhang won gold in the first individual gold medal at the Winter Games for Hungary.
Well, winter sports may not be the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of hot and humid Singapore, but that's all changing.
Yet with training support from China, Singapore's national short-track speed skating team is ready to compete at the Asian Games. Our correspondent Di Ki reports.
As these 4 Singaporean skaters are gearing up for their debut at the 2025 Asian Winter Games in Harbin, they're getting the final tune-up from the Chinese coach Zhao Yanzhi.
Ice feels good.
Sitting down with the team, they say they're grateful for the coach and there's still so much more to learn.
Me personally, I actually want to express my gratitude for her. She has put in a lot of effort, made a lot of sacrifices. I think she came from China with her family to come to a foreign country like Singapore. Even though a lot of us still speak Chinese, it's a foreign country and she is still willing to coach us.
Coach Zhao is a very knowledgeable and dedicated coach. And we have learned so much and grown under her a lot. China is like a powerhouse in this sport, so we still have so much to learn under her.
Coach Zhao says training winter athletes in a tropical country like Singapore isn't easy, with limited facilities and athletes balancing their studies, but their dedication and progress speak for themselves.
When I first arrived, they already had a solid foundation. My role was to refine their basics and build up their strengths. Over the past 6 years, they worked hard and improved tremendously. I wanted to support them as the country's winter sports have been steadily growing. I happened to join them at a key stage. The athletes' performances have really surprised me in a good way.
Ice skating associations between China and Singapore have forged a close partnership, with China sending experienced coaches to help develop talent. For these skaters competing on this stage for the first time, Coach Zhao says the goal is to gain experience, observe international competitors, and perform at their highest level.
We signed an agreement with China to promote short track and to develop our athletes, coaches, and officials under China's mentorship. And Coach Zhao Yanzhi was recommended through this agreement to Singapore. Our team has actually clocked new personal bests, new national records under her guidance. And we must say that it's thanks to the guidance and mentorship of China through our partnership.
A partnership lasting over a decade and still providing fresh momentum to help the team grow further.
I can do my best and contribute to the team and make my country proud.
Yeah. I think it'll be good if we can get some good positions. And I think it would be good if our efforts would be able to show in our results. Yeah, I think ultimately this would be a good experience and exposure for all of us.
For a country with no natural ice, competing in winter sports comes with its challenges. But Singapore skaters are proving that passion and preparation can go a long way. With guidance from China's experienced coaches, they're now ready to take on Asia's best. Back at CGTN, Harbin.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Why bicycles are the way to get around after the floods in Valencia devastated public transport.
Chinese calligraphy, or shufa, is a traditional visual art form that involves writing Chinese characters in a stylized way. It is thought to have originated alongside the earliest Chinese characters discovered to date, namely oracle bone inscriptions from the Shang dynasty at 16th to 11th century BC in Anyang, Henan province. There are 5 major styles of script: regular,
楷书,
running,
行书,
cursive,
草书,
clerical,
隶书,
and seal.
篆书.
4 essential pieces of equipment are used: brush,
笔,
ink,
墨,
paper,
纸,
and inkstone.
砚.
Collectively, these are known as the 4 treasures of the study. From brush inclination and direction to the speed of writing, every twist and turn of the wrist is calculated. Today, Chinese calligraphy is a highly valued traditional art form, for it is more than just writing. It is a living heritage.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Last month was the warmest January ever, but scientists say they're puzzled over why a cooling weather pattern known as La Nina didn't bring down temperatures by as much as expected.
The European Copernicus Climate Service says January 2025 was 1.7 degrees above pre-industrial levels. It's the latest in a string of monthly global temperature records.
As global temperatures continue to rise at alarming levels, the need to remove carbon emissions from our atmosphere has never been more urgent.
A company in Wales believes it's found a way to use algae to lock away carbon and keep it in the soil for thousands and thousands of years. Our correspondent Rhea El-Salahi reports.
We're living in a climate emergency, with the effects of the changing climate experienced worldwide. It's now widely recognised that we need to not only reduce emissions, but actively take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere permanently. Stephen Milburn is a physicist by training and now what he calls a climate entrepreneur. He started Nelly in 2023, part of a newly developed process to create biochar, short for biological charcoal, a stable solid that can store carbon for thousands of years. What do we have here?
Here is our algae nursery. We're using algae because it's nature's most efficient way of performing photosynthesis. There's very few organisms on Earth that can convert sunlight and carbon dioxide to biomass in this way.
Microalgae are some of the oldest life forms on Earth. Their origins date back around 3 billion years. They've evolved to optimize their ability to capture light and use carbon dioxide in diverse and often challenging environments, due to their high surface area to volume ratio and lack of complex structures like roots and stems. What are you doing to keep them alive?
Just the light, actually, in here, and giving them a little shake now and again. As it reaches a certain density, we take an amount of this and put it into each one of the photobioreactor tanks outside. Our proprietary technology in there is how we make that microalgae go really, really quick. Our additive profile is a mycelium and iron filing mix. And in essence, that's like a bit of mushroom and some tiny iron shavings. In addition to that, we have a reactor rod in each one of these, which supplies the light at the right wavelength for the right strain that's inside. And it also has an EM field generator. That's an electromagnetic field generator, which uniforms everything in there and helps it to grow quicker again.
And so this is where that then ends up?
Yeah. So once we've drained and dried the very, very wet microalgal biomass, we can then pyrolyze. We heat this biomass up to a very, very high temperature without a flame in the absence of oxygen, and we do that in these tanks.
Why is that absence of oxygen so important?
If we were to burn all of our biomass or heat our biomass up in the presence of oxygen, we'd release all of the carbon back into the atmosphere.
So what are you left with at the end of that process?
The wonder stuff, biochar. So this is a tub of microalgal-based biochar.
How does it differ to charcoal? Because this just looks like what I have on my barbecue.
Yeah, so it's quite a bit different. So we make this at a higher temperature than when charcoal is produced, but it's also a more stable form of carbon. So charcoal would decay a bit quicker than biochar does. So we can pretty much guarantee that the carbon that we have removed will stay stored and out of the atmosphere for at least 1,000 years.
Nelly plans to expand into carved former industrial sites with an installation that will remove at least 50,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide per year. Why does the world need carbon capture?
You can't argue that they're at an inflection point in the climate crisis. Really, when it boils down to it, as long as 1, 2, 3 or a handful of people do end up doing it at scale, then we will hopefully avoid the worst of the climate crisis, especially if we get it deployed now. It's not it needs to be done in the next 10 years, it needs to be done now.
Stephen Milburn, founder and CEO of Nelly Technologies, ending that report by Rhea El-Salahi.
Now, last year's floods in the Spanish region of Valencia caused substantial damage to the roads and the railways.
Many People lost their cars too after they were submerged by rising water. Now, as our correspondent Ken Brown reports, it's bicycles that have come to the rescue.
The streets of Valencia. Climate emergency ground zero in November last year, the city was devastated by flooding that claimed over 200 lives. Now it's trying to get its economy rolling again, and Bicis Beratotes, or Bicycles for All volunteers, are in the workshop on Saturday morning to meet demand. Known locally as La Dana, the flooding destroyed some 120,000 cars and paralysed public transport, making bikes the best way to get around many parts of Valencia. Even now, months later, the organisation Bicycles for Everyone has a waiting list of 600 people. The project is part of the Soterranya Collective, a non-profit NGO that helps local people who need it most.
This is a social project that is pro-recycling and anti-waste. We have found and fixed 1,277 bikes. Most of them had been discarded. For us, the bicycle is a tool of change, a way to make things better. What we want is for people to get on their bikes and stop using private cars.
Saturday morning is delivery time. For people like El Mehdi Hamani, it's a lifeline.
I'm happy. They brought me a bicycle and now I can get to work.
For others, like 66-year-old Jose Jimenez, who lost his house and 2 cars, the trauma of the floods is still raw.
It
was such a horrific experience, just awful. I hope no one else ever has to go through it. It's a disaster. A disaster. At least now I have a bike and the means of transport. So today is a better day. Today I'm happy.
Y ya tengo bicicleta. Ya tengo medio de transporte. Muy feliz. Muy feliz.
On the streets, the quiet power of community causes positive change. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things, like the Soterranya Collective. Ken Brown, CGTN, Valencia.
The headlines again. United States imports hit a record high as businesses prepare for President Trump's tariffs. China calls his policy vile.
A sigh of relief for borrowers as the Bank of England cuts interest rates to 4.5%, but it also slashes the UK's growth forecast, a major blow to the government.
And President Trump doubles down on his controversial plan for the United States to take over Gaza and for the millions of Palestinians there to be resettled.
That is it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Bye.